Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my first video of 2024. This year I want to make a lot more videos about books, which is why today I'll be recapping all the books I read in 2023. I read 41 books in total. There were quite a number of books that I DNF'd, but I won't be going into that today. But without further ado, the first book I read was Ultra Learning by Scott Young. So I gave this book a 5 out of 5, and the premise of the book is talking about how to learn things really quickly. Scott Young he went through the MIT Comp Sci syllabus as like a self-study journey, and he wrote this book about basically the different steps for learning something on your own. So a couple of insights I had actually, and I had notes here, so I'll be looking down throughout the video. Basically, one of the things is learning quickly and efficiently means intense learning that is very systematic. Oftentimes when you're self-studying something, for me personally, I want to learn how to draw. I don't really have a systematic way of doing it, and after reading this book, it gave me a much better picture and gave me a good direction as to how I could plan my self-study goals. The next book I read was The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. And this I gave also a 5 out of 5. So I listened to this book as an audiobook, and it was honestly so calming to listen to. I really should actually re-listen to this when I'm cleaning my room, because my room is kind of a mess right now and it's the beginning of the year. But there were a lot of things, it's just keep the things that bring you joy. So I try to ask myself this question when I'm thinking about, should I chuck this in the trash or should I keep it? It's does this bring me joy? I also really like the way that she teaches you to fold clothes. I kind of do that with my t-shirts now, and now they kind of all stand on their end, and it's really satisfying just looking at how neat they are. Something else is also cleaning up your space gives you clarity, and this is why I really need to clean my desk. But I have noticed that every single time that I clean my space, it really just clears up my head. And I've also started making my bed every morning now, and that also just gives me a sense of peace. The next book I read was Find Your Why by Simon Sinek, and I gave this book a 3 out of 5. So I don't exactly remember the specifics of the book, but in general, I remember feeling that I wasn't reading the book during the right time of my life. It's talking about basically finding your why, finding your vision and figuring out your values. And I think at the time I was reading it, I was too stressed about studying for exams to even worry about this stuff. But and it talks about how a lot of our values stem from the stories and our experiences. And one way that you can find your why is by finding someone to listen about the stories that you tell and figure out a common theme and all your common values from that. But in general, I don't think it was that relevant for me at the time. The next book I read was Getting Things Done by David Allen. This book totaled 5 out of 5. I love this book because it was so systematic in how to organize your life. If you feel like your life is very disorganized right now, I highly recommend that you read Getting Things Done. And I love his system for capturing things. So I kind of implemented myself nowadays too. Basically, you have a place to capture all the information or anything that you think of, because your brain is for coming up with ideas, not for holding ideas. In general, the idea is that you should capture everything that lands in your mind and process it later. It's a very systematic way of handling your inbox, and that way it keeps everything super organized. I'm kind of partly doing the entire GTD system, not entirely. I kind of fall off the wagon every now and then, but in general, it's a really good book. The next book I read was Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before by Julie Smith. I gave this book a 3 out of 5. I remember listening to it as an audiobook and walking and just taking a bit of notes on my phone, but I don't remember anything super specific. In general though, it's about our emotions, the way we think, and also a general mental health thing. It talks a lot about fears, motivation, reframing the situation, and I have written down that self-doubt chapter was really interesting, need to reread. But yes, I will probably reread that chapter just to see what I was referring to back then. So after reading a bunch of non-fiction books, I was kind of burning out, so I decided to read Normal People by Sally Rooney. And this book, I gave it 3 out of 5. It didn't really resonate with me as much, and I know a lot of people liked it, and I really wanted to like it. But after reading it, I was just kind of meh. I just didn't really relate. I do want to try some of her other books, like Conversation with Friends, I heard is also good. And I think Beautiful World, Where Are You? I think that's also one of her books. But, like, I just couldn't really connect with the characters in Normal People. Maybe I'm not a normal person, I don't know. But, yeah. The next book I read after Normal People was Tuesdays with Morrie. This is written by Mitch Albom, and he's the guy who also wrote The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. Tuesdays with Morrie was a really heartwarming book. It was about, like, you only learn how to live after you learn how to die. A lot about, like, enjoying the moment, really embracing your emotions. I think one thing that he's mentioned in the book that really stuck out to me was how, like, instead of trying to repress and push down your emotions, just, like, feel your emotions and let it entirely wash over you. And once you do that, it becomes easier for you to let go of emotions. So that was something I was trying to do for a while. In general, really good book, really heartwarming, made me cry. Yeah. The next book I read was They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvero. I gave this book a 3 out of 5. I liked the premise, like how they tell you what's going to happen already from the very beginning. And throughout the book, you're just like anticipating, like, okay, so how are they going to die? Like, what's going to happen? And basically, it's a society where on the day that you're about to die, you get a call, and everyone's scared of getting this call. And there's never usually there's never a mistake. But on this day, 2 boys, they both get 2 guys, basically. They both get a call that they're about to die that day. And they spend their last day together doing things outside of their comfort zone because they're living this day like it's going to be their last, because it is their last. And after reading the book, it made me think about whether or not fate exists. It makes me think about what are the things I want to do before I die, and what are the things that I could be doing today in order so that I don't really have that many regrets when I do die. But that's kind of slightly morbid for like a January morning. But in general, that's what the book was about. I think I was reading this after exams, yes. So I was reading this book after exams, and I think I was just so happy that I was done with exams. I wasn't sober enough to appreciate how sad the book was. That probably didn't help my situation, but minor spoilers. So the way they die at the end is actually kind of underwhelming and mundane, but I think that's actually kind of the point too. And what really matters is the way they spent their last minutes of their life. So the next book I read after that was The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. So, this book, the defining characteristic of the main male lead, was that he was big and he was tall, and that was like about it. Like, he had personality traits, but those were like, the number of times that he was described as being like huge was too much for me. I liked from Lukov with Love. I liked that Mariana Zapata book more, and I think that's my favorite book written by her. Of all the books I've read so far, which I think I've read like 4, from Lukov with Love is my favorite book. Overall, it's just kind of mad because of how the guy was constantly being described by his physical appearance. The book I read after that was Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So, I forgot to actually state my ratings. Okay, so Tuesdays with Morrie I gave 4 out of 5. They Both Die at the End I gave 3 out of 5. Even though now that I think about it, maybe it's a 4 out of 5 too. My rating for books is all over the place. Wall of Winnipeg and Me, I gave that I gave that 2 out of 5. I think that's staying back. And then Carrie Soto is Back, I gave a 3 out of 5. So Carrie Soto is Back is about Carrie Soto, who's a tennis player. She shows up a bit in Malibu Rising, and now this book focuses on her. Overall, this was not my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid books, but I did like it better than Malibu Rising, and I liked how it portrayed the difficulties that women faced in the realm of sports, and in tennis in particular for this book. It focused a lot on tennis, and I kind of wasn't in the mood for a sports book, especially after reading The Wall of Winnipeg and Me. But overall, good book. It was like poking at a lot of things that happen in society today. So I still would recommend this book, and it's by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Her books are always good. The next book I read was The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, and I think I gave this book a 3 out of 5. I really liked the mix of fantasy and action, and how the pacing was really good. I was hooked from the very beginning, and the pacing overall, if you want something fast-paced, this is a good book. I also really like the Chinese elements in it. I think once I finished the first book, I was reading the second book, and then it started just getting a bit too depressing for me. I think school also started around that time, and I wanted something that was just like easier for me to read. The descriptions are also really good in this book, and I wish, I'm considering rereading this book just so I can reimagine the world and really slow down when I read fantasy, because I realize that whenever I read any book that has huge chunks of description, I end up just skipping over the paragraph, which is a really, really bad habit for me. It kind of defeats part of the purpose of reading fantasy. I'm more a character-driven reader, and I'm driven by dialogue more than by descriptions, but I still want to get the full experience of reading the book, and I feel like I'm missing out on part of that when I skip over huge chunks of the book. The next book I read was Building a Second Brain by Tiago Forte. So after school started, I started getting slightly neurotic about organizing my life and stuff. So this book reminded me a bit of Getting Things Done by David Allen. I still like Getting Things Done more, but this book focuses more on, as the title suggests, building a second brain. And it's basically offloading all the knowledge or all the thoughts that you have and all the ideas into an external place, so a computer. A lot of people use Notion. I tried doing it in RemNote. I know people also do it in Obsidian. There's a bunch of videos on YouTube talking about how people do it. And I tried building a second brain, but I just kind of found it hard to maintain. Constantly having to let's build a tree of connections, or I think maybe I made it a bit too complicated for myself. But overall, I just ended up not going through the steps that Tiago Forte talks about in the book, where it's code, capture, organize, distill, and express. Eventually, I just kind of brain dumped my thoughts into Apple Notes or into RemNote when I journal, but that was about it. The next book I read was Thanks for the Feedback by Douglas Stone, and originally I gave this a 3 out of 5, but retrospectively, I'm gonna bump this up to a 4 out of 5 because I really liked the ideas that it talked about in the book. Basically, it talks about how we receive different types of feedback, and sometimes we don't have the best coaches in life, so we need to learn how to extract the valuable information from the feedback we get from the people around us. So there's multiple different types of feedback, and we need to be explicit about the type of feedback that we need. So for example, there's appreciation, evaluation, or coaching. Maybe when I'm talking to someone, I just want to be appreciated. But if they end up giving me coaching feedback, I'm gonna be unsatisfied when I leave the conversation because that's not really what I wanted. So oftentimes, because of this crosstalk, because of this mismatch between the type of feedback that I'm looking for and the type of feedback I actually get, we have different conflicts with different people. For feedback triggers, there's 3 feedback triggers, and they're truth, relationship, so this is the source or the relationship to the giver, and identity triggers. And these triggers also prevent us from understanding the feedback. I would highly recommend this book if you care about having good communication with different people and communicating your ideas across. This is something I still need to work on, and I need to reread this book. I think that's been a common theme throughout this video so far. There are so many books that I just kind of want to reread, and there's also so many books on my TBR. It's insane. The next book I read was Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. And this is my favorite Agatha Christie book, which is technically not saying much because I've only read 2. I read this book and I read And Then There Were None, but I like this book more than And Then There Were None. This book is about a murder that happens on a train, which is the Orient Express. And they're trying to figure out who committed the murder before the train arrives at the final destination. They're just like stuck in the train. So it's very fast paced. I liked the ending. I really, really liked the ending. I'm about to spoil it here. But highly recommend just go read the book if you're interested in murder mysteries. In general, I find that I really like Agatha Christie's books for how they're short and they're not bogged down by a lot of details that sometimes longer mystery books will have. So if you want something short and really enjoyable, read Murder on Orient Express. The next book I read was Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I give this book a 5 out of 5, and I was totally hung over this book after I finished reading it. And I didn't think it was possible for me to be hung over Pride and Prejudice, but for some reason I was. I think we all kind of know what Pride and Prejudice is about, but if you don't, it's about the Bennet sisters, and in particular, Elizabeth Bennet, and how she's like navigating society and the pressures of her having to find a husband, and then enter Mr. Darcy. After I finished reading this book, I was so hungover, and then I watched the movie, and the movie is so good. Like, some of the scenes that are shot without any cuts. Like, there's a ballroom dancing scene that was shot with one take, and it's amazing how the director managed to do that. And then there's this one video on YouTube that's like 7 minutes of Mr. Darcy being super socially awkward, but also really endearing. And I love that video. And rewatching that video definitely did not help my hangover, but that's okay. After reading Pride and Prejudice, I decided to read North and South. This is also a classic. It's written by Elizabeth Gaskell, and it's very similar to Pride and Prejudice. Like, if I were to summarize it in one sentence, it would be Pride and Prejudice for socialists. I think one of my friends actually told me this, so props to her. This was not as good as Pride and Prejudice, but still pretty good. So if you like the Pride and Prejudice trope, you should read North and South afterwards. The next book I read was The Golden Couple by Greer Hendricks, and I gave this book a 4 out of 5. It's about a so-and-so golden couple, and the book talks about all the skeletons in their closet, basically. When the couple has like marriage issues, they decide to find a couples counselor, and they meet Avery, who's a therapist. And the way that Avery does therapy is supposedly very unconventional, and it was really interesting reading about the way she does therapy. So, really interesting book. I liked the action. Plot twist at the end was okay. Would recommend this book. The next book I read was Emma. One of my goals last year was actually to read all of the Jane Austen books, which I failed at, but I will keep trying this year. So Emma is probably my favorite Jane Austen book of all the ones I've read, even more than Pride and Prejudice, just because I feel like Pride and Prejudice is like, everyone likes it, and I kind of want to like something that not everyone likes. I don't know. Is that weird? Tell me if that's weird, okay? Let me know in the comments. But Emma was very interesting. I really liked the character. Emma, even though she's like so annoying, she's always in other people's business, but I really liked how the dialogue was written in the book. I really liked Emma, even though she was so annoying, and she does get better in the end. So, good book. After reading Emma, I decided to take a break from fiction, and then I read a non-fiction book called The Gap and the Gain. So I didn't take notes during this non-fiction book, and I realized that when I don't take notes, I just kind of completely forget about what the book is about. But the general premise is to measure yourself against your past self and measure that gain that you've made, the improvements you have made, instead of always measuring yourself against your future goal, which kind of points out the gap, or measuring yourself against the people around you. There's a lot more to this book besides that, but that is the main idea. And it also has a lot of good journal prompts I have written down in my RevNote, but I haven't gotten around to like rereading it and doing it again. But okay, it was an okay book. I think I gave this a 3 out of 5. The next book I read was Eat the Frog, and this one was good. It has a heck ton load of productivity, like hacks, but also principles, and it kind of reminds me of the book Make Time, but Make Time is a lot more focusing on time management skills and tips and tricks for that, whereas Eat the Frog is more on productivity. And one of the biggest things is to eat the frog, which is to do the hardest thing first thing in the morning. Because after you get that done, everything else that's left in your day is just going to be something that's simpler and more enjoyable. After reading this book, I read another Jane Austen book, which is Sense and Sensibility. So I gave this book a 3 out of 5. I remember really liking the sister dynamic because it's about two sisters who are actually very different, and it reminded me of like my sister and I because we also have very different personalities. In general, again, don't really remember much. I should probably reread the book. Yeah. The next book I read was Maybe in Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So this book was actually a reread, and I still gave it a 5 out of 5 after my reread. But I did realize I actually kind of romanticize how much I liked the book when I read it the first time. Upon reading it a second time, if it wasn't for the nostalgia factor, it probably wouldn't have been a 5 out of 5. The book is about a girl and two possible lives that she would have lived that's hinging on one decision she made one night. And I really liked the premise of the book, but I think that the execution could have been better, and I wish the book was slightly longer and kind of dove more into the details. But I also understand that a lot of it is having things not explicitly written out leaves more space for the reader's imagination, which I also appreciate. So I can imagine how things ended up playing out for her. The next book I read was Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. And if you've read any of Ali Hazelwood's book, it follows her general kind of template formula flow of telling the story. But in this case, the girl is someone who struggles with being a people pleaser. And I could totally relate with the girl, so I really enjoyed this book. The next book I read was Queen of the Night by Alexander Chee, and I gave this book a 3 out of 5. It's talking about a girl that was an orphan, and she kind of reinvents herself as an opera singer. Opera singer. During the French Revolution, it's slightly historical fiction. I actually got this book a very, very long time ago on my Kindle, but I never got around to reading it. And rereading this was a nice book. If you like historical fiction, maybe you'll like this. But it's very loosely based on history, so don't count on it being super historically accurate. And I wish I kind of remembered the history of what was happening during the French Revolution more, so I could kind of connect more with this book. But yeah, that was that. After reading that, I read Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, and I love dragons. I really like dragons. Character dynamic in the book was, I made another video about this, so I won't go into it in depth. But in general, I just really like dragons. After Fourth Wing, I read The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. This book I gave a 3 out of 5. Oh yeah, Fourth Wing I gave 4 stars. This Serpent book was not my cup of tea. It was a Hunger Games mixed with vampires. But if that's down your alley, go for it. But it's not exactly the type of book I like, and I realized I like Dragonborn vampires. After reading that, I finally finished reading The Alter Ego Effect by Todd Herman, and it talks about how there's 2 ways to kind of reinvent yourself, to make improvements about your own life. And it's number one, either you change your habits, and by changing your habits, your identity slowly shifts. So saying one of the things you want to do this year is to be more fit and to exercise more. So maybe you set a habit of going to the gym 3 times every week. And eventually, after doing this consistently, you will eventually shift your identity into being someone who goes to the gym regularly and exercises. Alternatively, this book talks about the alter ego effect, which is to actually shift your identity first. And the way you shift your identity is by developing this alter ego. So you shift your identity and step into the shoes of being someone who just exercises regularly at the gym. And having this identity shift actually makes it easier for you to develop the habits and act like that person. Very interesting book. There are a lot of exercises in the book that I should have done while reading the book but I didn't. So, again, probably another book I would want to reread. After finishing The Alter Ego Effect, I read Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This book, I really, really wanted to like it. I saw a lot of people on BookTube talking about how good this book was, and I really wanted to like it, but I just didn't. The next book I read afterwards was Poison Study by Maria Snyder. I gave this book a 3 out of 5. I liked the general setup of the book, how like the girl is trained to be a taste tester, to taste poisons. But the ending felt very rushed. I felt that the ending just kind of got like smushed into like the final chapter, and I didn't like that. So that I finished the book with a bad impression, basically. The next book I read afterwards was All Roads Lead Here by Mariana Zapata, and this was, I think, my most recent Mariana Zapata book. This book was kind of different from her other books, actually. It was less focused on the romance and more focused on the girl kind of rediscovering herself after getting out of her previous relationship. And the sports that this book kind of focuses on is hiking. So after reading this one, it kind of made me want to start hiking. But then I realized that I just enjoy exercising at the gym more often. After reading this book, I started rereading some old books. And the first book I reread was The Queen of Atolia by Megan Wallen Turner. Her books do not disappoint. The Queen's Thief series, so The Queen of Atolia, The King of Atolia, these were the 2 books I reread, and I so love them. I love the main character. I love Eugenides. I love how his emotions are so like raw and true when he expresses them, but usually he doesn't really he's not very vulnerable to the people around him, and he always like puts up a front. I love how he can like scheme and how he's like a thief and he steals stuff. I just love this character, and I love the series. Gave this book a 5 out of 5. After reading Queen of Atolia, Iron Flame came out. So this was around November, early November. So then I read Iron Flame, which is book 2 of Fourth Wave, also written by Rebecca Yarros. And this book, oh god, I loved and hated it for multiple reasons. I still loved the dragons. I liked the supporting characters. I liked the Dane redemption arc, but the relationship between Violet and Xaden was this is the first fantasy romance book, I think, where I'm actually cheering on for the male lead instead of the female lead. Like, as I was reading the book, I was just getting more and more irritated about how Violet was handling her relationships with the guy, her relationships with her friend, the entire situation of them being at war. Yes, this book, I still liked it, but I didn't like how the girl was. After finishing Iron Flame, I read the other book that also came out on the same day, Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 because it made me cry, and any book that makes me cry automatically gets 4 stars or higher. I liked this Ali Hazelwood book, actually. It still was a bit formulaic, but I don't hate the fact that it was predictable, because I do enjoy, the level of romance, especially in this book, because it was YA. And it's awesome the fact that the guy was mentioned as being tall, probably only twice during the book, which is really rare. In Love Hypothesis, Adam was mentioned as being tall so many times, I just couldn't. This book focuses on chess, and it's just a cute rom-com to relax to read. After reading this book, I read another also very cute book, The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. This book is written by Sangu Mandana, and I gave this a 4 out of 5. In one word, this book is cute. Everything was very cute. The location was cute, the characters were cute, the relationship was cute, the kids in the book were really cute. And this was a very cute, cozy fantasy book. After that, I reread another old book, The Report Card by Andrew Clements. I remember this was my all-time favorite book in elementary school, even after I read Harry Potter. Even after reading the Harry Potter series and the Percy Jackson series, I still really, really loved The Report Card. I don't exactly understand why I liked it so much. I think part of the reason was because the main character's name was Nora, which started with an N, which is the same letter that my name starts with. And like, for some reason, that just made me feel like I had a connection with Nora. And I liked the idea of how she could just have that level of control over her grades where she intentionally gets terrible grades in order to make a statement. Especially, like, I think she was a fourth grader or something. I just thought that was so cool. And the book talks about how, like, grades don't really define how smart you are. And I think that message kind of flew over my head when I was reading it in elementary school, which makes me want to reread a lot of books I also read when I was in elementary school and even in middle school to see, like, what else flew over my head. After reading the report card, I read The Little Prince by Antoine. I don't know how to pronounce the author's name because it's French, so I'm totally butchering it. But it's Antoine Saint-Exupéry. And sorry. This book though, I gave a 5 out of 5 because I felt like every single line was like a metaphor for life. And half the time when I was reading it, I was like, okay, so what is like this guy like a metaphor? What is the kingdom metaphor? And I was like looking it up. And I'm like, what is the rose a metaphor? And there's like so many different interpretations. And I feel like you could interpret it based on like the symbolism, but just like how it makes you feel. It's just, there's so many different interpretations. I love the symbolism. I want to reread the book. And I also want to read some literary like analysis about this book before rereading The Little Prince itself, just so that when I reread the book, I can kind of read more into what's between the lines. After reading The Little Prince, I reread The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. This book, I gave it 3 out of 5 of a reread, I think. Did I? No, I gave it 4 out of 5. So I guess it's women in STEM, same general formulaic plot line, written by Ali Hazelwood. But it was my first Ali Hazelwood book, and I remember really liking it when I first read it. And I still liked it. I think there were some fringe parts that just got slightly more cringier, if that's a word, on my second read, just because I already knew what was happening. But I liked the ending, and I still liked the 5 minutes of therapy that Olive gets from the Uber driver. That was probably one of my favorite moments in the book. After reading Love Hypothesis, there were 2 more books I read before the year ended, and one of those was Happy Place by Emily Henry. So I read a bit of Emily Henry in the past. I read People We Meet on Vacation and Book Lovers. I didn't love those books. I did not like People We Meet on Vacation. Book Lovers was okay. And then I heard Happy Place was really good. So I decided to read that, and it was good in some senses. The ending kind of didn't feel like it really made a lot of sense. And the general trope of like exes getting back together, plus found family, they're basically meeting up at a vacation house, and this is going to be their last trip together at this vacation house because the house is going to be sold. So the 6 friends that get together kind of try to create the best memories they can here. Some of the things I felt like wasn't really realistic though, but in general, I did like this book. And I liked it more than Book Lovers, and I definitely liked it more than People We Meet on Vacation. So would recommend this book if you want to read a Emily Henry book. I gave this book a 4 out of 5, by the way. And the last book I read of 2023 was It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. And I read the first book. This is the second book to It Ends With Us. And part of the reason why I didn't read this book when it first came out because I had read It Ends With Us, was because I thought this book was going to have a lot of flashbacks about the history between the 2 characters, Atlas and Lily Bloom. But I didn't want to read about flashbacks. I tend to not like books that have flashbacks in them and like POV shifts sometimes. But turns out that this book actually just picks up directly off of where the first book ends. So that was nice. And this book was good in a very convoluted way. in that I felt that Kobo kind of addressed all the critics and all the criticisms that were made about her first book, and she kind of addressed all of those different things and made everything super perfect in this second book. But I felt like there was a bit too much hedging. Like, it explains, like, so I think one of the things people said was like, how can Lily Bloom trust her child, her baby, to be living with her abusive husband? Spoiler alert, if you didn't realize, it's about an abusive relationship. How can she trust this and do the co-parenting? Well, in book 2, it talks about how this plays out. Something else though is just overall it felt too perfect. The book felt way too perfect. Like, there was no conflict. It felt like a very, very long epilogue to book 1. So it wasn't bad, but it wasn't good either. It was just very meh. I think it just a 3 out of 5. I don't remember, but yeah. So that wraps up all 41 books that I read in 2023. In this year, I want to read 60 books, which means I should be reading an average of 5 books per month. I don't know if I'll reach this goal because last year I set the goal of reading 45 books and then I only read 41. But I think that having like a higher goal kind of motivates me a bit to read more books. So we'll see how that goes. And I'll be making another video about planning all my reading goals for this coming year. So if you're interested in that, please subscribe, give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and please let me know in the comments down below what your favorite book was in the past year. I need some more book recs, even though my TBR is like extremely long. But until my next video, bye bye!